From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Gun trafficking is a real thing. It was very common. So I told them, listen, once I get like 200-300 guns, I fill that truck with furniture and I'll move a family from Atlanta to New York, and I just put all the guns, hide them in the furniture. Even if I get pulled over, I say, man, I'm just moving furniture. It's not my stuff. So, and these guys love that. They were like, right on. We're buying tens of thousands of machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, stolen guns, you name it, grenades, everything they're bringing in. Every drug known to mankind, and this thing is just spider webbing. And we're having to be strategic with spending money because we only want to spend on, get the most bang for the buck.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Lou Valoze, a former US federal agent with the ATF who spent over 2 decades working deep undercover. Lou, so much to talk about. I'm going to throw one thing out that I heard on a podcast, I think it was on The Real Ones, that you talked about going into a bikie clubhouse. I worked gangs for a long time, so I know the environment you're talking about. That you went into a bikie clubhouse unannounced to make some connections. Do you want to just tell us through that story? Because it blew me away, the fact that you went in there and how you manage yourself in that environment.
Yeah, for sure. It was very early in my undercover career. It was actually the first kind of, I guess what you would call organized crime case I got pulled into. I was only doing up to that point, I had only done those back alley, drug deals and gun deals that we talked about. So, and the only reason I got called into this was I was the only agent in my field division, the only other agent that had a motorcycle license. It wasn't because of any skill or anything I had. I really knew nothing about outlaw bikers. I didn't grow up in that environment. It wasn't a huge thing up in New York. And so there was an undercover agent who was already somewhat embedded with this gang. And his partner, and in a lot of these cases, it's very important that you have a partner, just for a lot of reasons. His partner was a local cop who was just on the task force. And when his department saw they were supposed to go with this gang down to a bike run at Daytona, which is a big bike rally and all that, and this was in Atlanta, Georgia, his department were like, listen, we didn't really sign up for all this. We're going to pull our guy out. We're getting in a little bit over his head.
A little bit deep.
Yeah, a little bit deep. So ATF, the ATF agent in there needed a partner, so I got the call. Again, only reason was I had a motorcycle license, and the only reason I had a motorcycle license was when I was a kid, like, I don't know, maybe 17 or 18 years old, I had a Yamaha for like 3 months. I was never any good at riding a motorcycle or anything like that. Never been on a Harley. So, but I never said no. So when they asked me, I said, I'm in, let's go. So, when I got there, I met the informants, these 2 huge biker guys, the undercover, and they gave me this chopper, one of them old kickstart shovelhead Harleys. I couldn't figure out how to start it, let alone ride it. So they were like, hey, let's go, follow us. And, driving through we're in North Georgia, driving into Atlanta, and it was kind of misty. A little bit of rain coming down, and these guys drive real fast, and I'm trying to follow them. The headlight, all I can see are taillights getting farther and farther away, and I go around a curve and I drop the bike, end up in a ditch, and if you heard me tell this story before, but I'm in the ditch and the bike's still on. The mirrors are all bent and everything, and they finally realize I'm not behind them anymore, and they come back. And the big informant says to the undercover agent, goes, you want us to bring this fucking guy into the Outlaws Clubhouse? He can't even ride a motorcycle. And when I, as bad as I was hurting from the fall, when I heard him say that, I was like, no, uh-uh. Help me pick this bike up and bend everything back as best we could. It was still drivable. And so we went to this clubhouse, and when I walked in, it was a shock for me. I again, I didn't have any experience. I didn't know anything about these guys, and it was just a dark, evil place.
Yeah.
And I just got a really bad feeling in there. And there's these guys, and they're just some nasty fellows. I mean, you got them over there.
Yeah.
They're some bad guys, man. And I'm in there, and I realize, I don't know how to act. I don't know anything about these guys. So, I'm going to listen to my partner, my old partner, my first partner. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut for a while. And I did. I was a wallflower, man. I just stood against a wall, and, my new partner there he's interacting with these guys, and they're kissing and hugging and drinking and all that. And, I just stood there, man. And I watched how these guys carried themselves, how they handled themselves, and I could tell right away who the president was by the way he was being treated and all. And after probably close to 45 minutes of not saying a word and just watching, I made the decision to approach the president. I went up to the
Yeah.
president, and like I said before, I was real big back then, and so I figured, at least I got something to offer. I'm a big goon, at
Yeah.
least, young. And I said to the president, sir, this is my name, and this is my first time here. I'm with so and so. I don't know your rules. I don't know your culture, and I certainly don't want to offend you or anybody else. I just want to learn from you guys because I like what I see, and I want to become one of you guys someday. And man, he just ate that up because he's just looking at this big goon that he can mold, and
Yeah.
make use, because that's what they do. They use people and make into one of his own. And from that point, he took a liking to me and took me under his wing. And I learned such a valuable lesson that day
Yeah.
for my future long-term operations. Shut up, read the room,
Yeah.
right? And talk very strategically to the right people.
Yeah, look, I wanted to unpack that and get you to tell that story again because when you started telling the story that you had a bike license, like, okay, that's not going to make you look like you've been born on a Harley Davidson and be able to rock up to a clubhouse and look the part and act the part. So I was laughing with you, but also at you, thinking, who the hell's this bloke think he is? He's going to pull this one off. Full kudos to you after you drop the bike to get back on there, but I understand when your pride's been insulted, sometimes you just got to suck it in. But I was really curious. I was really, because, and yeah, if you want to talk bikes with legitimate bikies, they're going to catch you out within saying hello if you don't know your way around a Harley. But the other thing is, I was really curious, knowing the atmosphere, and you described it very well, what goes on in a clubhouse. It has a sense of menace about it the moment you set foot in there. How you handle it. And it was a fascinating way that, okay, and I really got an insight into the way that you would operate. Like, you could have gone in there and tried to talk as a tough guy, and they would have smelt you out straight away and think, how that this is not adding up. But the approach you had seemed to just work perfectly for you.
I didn't like it. I never liked the biker stuff. I only did two of those, which was two more than I wanted to do.
Yeah,
I ended up, after the Outlaws in Atlanta, I ended up going to California, maybe 3 or 4 years later, and on a Hell's Angels, working undercover on a Hell's Angels out of San Diego
yeah,
case. And I tell you, I never really got much better on a motorcycle. And just to bring the story full circle, uh, I actually, I had an undercover motorcycle for most of my career. And, then I kind of got into it a little bit. And I probably owned maybe 6 or 7 Harleys
yeah,
on personal bikes. And, but it just wasn't me. I never was a good motorcycle rider. And about about 5 years ago, we were going on a family vacation. I hadn't started my bike in probably 3 or 4 months. So I said, you know what? Let me just ride the bike around the neighborhood just to charge the battery.
Yeah.
And so I just drove around my neighborhood, and it had rained like the day before, and I couldn't have been going more than 2 or 3 miles per hour. I mean, I was barely moving, just taking a turn. I went over some leaves. I didn't realize they were wet underneath, and the bike went out, and I fell. I dumped the bike again, and I sold that bike as soon as we got back from vacation, and I've never been on one since.
Your
So
bike riding days are over.
yeah,
It's a
that
pretty
was it.
it's a pretty easy way to make a fool of yourself when you think you're sitting pretty, looking cool, and yeah, you shouldn't have gone over those
Yep.
leaves. Oh,
Yeah.
you pull up and just drop the bike and can't pick it up. But all these things that can happen. Dealing with the pressure, there was another interesting thing I've heard you say in interviews that you would quite often go into boxing gyms or jiu-jitsu and get lit up by some boxer or get grappled to the ground and mauled by someone that's a little bit better. I found in my career, like when I was under pressure, I like to box as well, or kickbox. I'd go and if someone's kicking you in the head or someone's punching you, you feel like you forget all the stresses of work, and it really is a way to de-stress. The way that you were talking about it, you're talking about, well, the pressure that you feel when you're getting lit up by someone in the boxing ring that's better than you, and you've still got 2 minutes to go of a 3-minute round. That's the type of
Yep.
pressure you need to be able to deal with when you're undercover in the pressure spots. Is that something that it would just work for you, finding pressure, dealing with pressure that way?
That was about the only thing that worked for me.
Yeah,
And it's funny, Gary, very similar feeling to me to to walk into a boxing gym in some strange city
yeah,
to spar was a very similar feeling as walking into that outlaw biker clubhouse,
yeah,
right? Kind of enemy territory. No one knows you, but you big guy, you're walking into a boxing gym, everyone's going to be looking at you.
yeah,
You get in a ring, and it is amazing, when you are not a professional fighter
yeah,
and you get into a ring with a pro, even I'm just talking about these local pros
yeah.
who just fight club fight, the skill difference is just amazing.
Light you up like a
And
Christmas tree.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're totally, and if they 99% of them are cool,
yeah,
but there's always that one sometimes who goes overboard. But it to me it was a mental exercise as much as it was physical exercise,
yeah,
just to keep me on my toes and keep that that sense of being uncomfortable, getting comfortable with being in an uncomfortable situation, whether someone's taking your back on the mat in jujitsu, or some guys just sending body shots into you, in a boxing ring, to be able to breathe and still keep your head and be comfortable in those kind of situations. So to me, that was how I did. A lot of guys, would just go out and drink their asses off.
mm,
But that worked. Not that I didn't do that as well,
yeah.
but that worked better for me to keep me mentally sound during these things.
Yeah, I was fascinated that it came up in conversation with you, and I could really relate to it because it was a way of sort of separating. And yeah, I also sometimes find have a drink and forget about things, but then you wake up the next day and it hasn't got any better. So yeah, challenging yourself there, and yeah, when you're walking in and you would have walked in the court. I always got nervous before I walked in the court. Didn't matter that you weren't hiding anything. You knew you were going to be carved up and carved up very publicly. That you get accustomed to that pressure, that you're comfortable being uncomfortable, and I could really relate to that. And it's a good way. And there's other ways you could find that, but boxing works for me. Like stepping in there and okay, well this is real pressure. You're going to get knocked
Yep.
out if you don't keep your hands up. So yeah, it was interesting. Let's talk about the storefront sting, because it's a strategy that you became an expert on, like across the country. but it's a strategy, and just go into how you want to describe it. But I think it's fascinating, and the results that you got. And if I'm not wrong, it's the amount of guns and drugs you got off the street from these operations known as the storefront sting.
Yep. I always, I start out by saying we did not invent the storefront.
Yep.
Concept that, the NYPD and LAPD, they were doing these things back in the 60s and 70s. But for the most part, they were just doing, they were trying to disrupt these fencing operations, stolen goods.
Yeah.
So they would do little pawn shop type places and to take in stolen merchandise
Yep.
for the most part. We took that concept and just blew it up and made it bigger and bigger. And I fell into that kind of the same way. I fell into that biker case. I just got a phone call from an agent who in another office who said, "Hey man, would you we're starting up this storefront operation. It's going to be a tattoo shop. We're doing it in conjunction with the local sheriff's department. We need an undercover. Would you do the undercover?" I said, "Absolutely. I'll be there tomorrow." And I didn't really even know what a storefront was.
Yeah.
So I went up there and I saw the setup they had, and it was phenomenal, man. It was in a really bad neighborhood, very ghetto, and it was a ghetto tattoo shop. Like it was a kind of place you wouldn't want to get a tattoo, for the most part. And the informant was the tattoo artist, and he was trying to stay out of prison. And he had already in prison, he had tattooed everybody, so he knew the players, he knew everybody. And his deal with with the police and with ATF was he was going to work off his charges by doing this case. So he was just going to do the tattoos and bring the bad guys in. And it was my job and my undercover team to engage them. And it was a gang-ridden place, gangs everywhere. And, we were to buy the guns, buy the drugs, stolen cars, whatever they were doing, and hopefully take some of these gangs down. So we started, and I was the manager of this place, and we had the tattoo area with the chair, and then there was just like an area where we sold paraphernalia.
Yeah.
And all the flash on the wall and the rolling papers and all that stuff. And I didn't really have high expectations. I didn't really know what to expect. And as they started trickling in, the people to get tattoos, and we started just having conversations. They had a lot of good ideas. The sheriff's department. They said, "We're going to put out just a clear box of Sharpies, markers, and the walls were all white, right? They just painted all the walls white. They said, "We're going to tell these guys they can go ahead and they can tag all the walls, whatever they want.
Good.
Just tell them no hating, right? No hating on another gang, just keep it civil." So we told them that, and they started tagging the walls and doing all their gang signs and stuff. And the whole no hating thing that lasted about 10 minutes, right? And they're thinly veiled threats and murder threats and all that. And we actually cut all that out as evidence, all the drywall at the end of the case. But we told these guys when they would come in, "Listen, this is neutral territory. Everybody's welcome here. No beefing when you're in here. It's neutral." So it just started out real small. They would come in and they, everyone was smoking weed in there. The informant was smoking weed. He wasn't supposed to. Everyone who was in there was smoking weed except for us. But there was no ventilation. There was no. I mean, so we were probably high the whole time, I'm sure. And we just started making conversation with these guys, and inevitably, these guys sell drugs and guns, and it came up, and I let them know that my side hustle was I had a moving truck, which we really did, and I would move people, from place to place, but I would use that truck when I got enough guns that I would sell in New York. And I don't know what you know about, I don't know how it works in Australia, but every state has different gun laws here. So
Yeah.
it's the whole supply demand graph, right? So in states like New York, where the normal person can't get a gun and carry it.
Yeah.
Okay. And in places down south here, Georgia, the Carolinas, anyone can buy a gun and carry it.
Yeah.
So that gun down here that you can buy for $300 is you can sell in New York for $2,000
Okay. Big
on the
profit.
streets. So gun trafficking is a real thing, very common. So I told them, listen, once I get like 200-300 guns, I fill that truck with furniture and I'll move a family from Atlanta to New York, and I just put all the guns, hide them in the furniture. Even if I get pulled over, I say, man, I'm just moving furniture.
Yeah.
It's not my stuff. So, and these guys loved that. They were like, right on. So that was my excuse to keep buying guns. So next thing I knew, man, we are asking for more money. We don't even have enough buy money. We're buying tens of thousands of ecstasy pills, and we're buying machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, um, stolen guns, you name it. We're buying it. Grenades, everything they're bringing in. Every drug known to mankind, and this thing is just spider webbing. And
Yeah.
without, once the word got out on the street, we didn't even have to do that much. They're just coming to us.
Yeah.
And we're having to be strategic with spending money because we only want to spend on, get the most bang for the buck.
Yeah.
We're actually we're turning people away. And so the success, 12 months later, it was a 12-month operation. We had purchased 430 crime guns.
Wow.
And this is a small city. This is Augusta, Georgia, not a huge city. And, drugs, I mean, I can't even tell you how much drugs, but we had 100 defendants, 100 federal defendants, or no, I think we had 65 federal defendants and about 35 state defendants.
Yeah.
And, these are numbers that ATF wasn't used to seeing.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Bees to a honeypot. As they're coming in, you're recording all the transactions. You're keeping the records. It's basically you've got them jammed up big time. If they've come in there, they've come into your trap, and it's going to be very hard for them to wiggle their way out of that in the court situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say it was entrapment or anything else when you're on camera, driving up in your car, walking through the door, pulling a gun out of your waist and selling it, right? It's a tough one to defend. That's why none of those cases ever went to trial.
Yeah.
The hardest part in that type of operation, we found out, was identifying everybody, right?
Okay.
They would never drive up in a car that was registered to them. It'd be registered to some girl, or it'd be a rental, and it'd be rented by somebody else, some girl or whatever it was. They'd never give you a real name. A lot of times they were just using burner phones. So we'd get real creative to identify these guys. Sometimes we would have to have cover teams follow them and try and put them to bed or whatever it was. We did other creative things like giveaways. We found that these guys never wanted to give out their real name or their real number, but if you offered them something free, the possibility of a free television or a $300 cash prize or something, they would fill out their little form and they would put a real phone number or a real name or some way to get a hold of them in case they won. And I would tell these guys, listen, just fold it at the corner and I'll make sure I pick you because I'm the one who picks a winner. So we did that a lot, and we would actually give TVs away, whatever it was, to keep it real. But that's and even if they didn't put anything real down, we would even have the prints lifted from the little slip they filled out when they dropped it in. So we got creative.
I love the creative side of it, like law enforcement, and I think that's a part of law enforcement. People see it as black and white, but creative thinking like that, I'm getting excited just thinking of all the opportunities where you've got people coming in like that and the things that you could do. One of the things that you talk about in the book, and you use a number of examples, but just give a sense of it when you talk street theatre, when you've got to get these blokes to the people that you're trying to bring in, get them to accept you are the genuine bad guys?
Street theater is my favorite aspect of my
Yeah, I
career.
reckon it would be a bit of fun. Yeah,
The most fun I ever had in my whole career was doing street theater. And, I take no credit. I didn't invent it. It was
yeah,
guys before me who were doing it. But basically the principle was, and we did it for several reasons. But the main reasons we were doing it, the street theater in these storefronts, was to show the bad guys, in this community we were in, that we were moving the product, right? Because who just keeps buying drugs and keeps buying
Yeah.
guns like nonstop? Cops.
cops.
Okay.
Yeah,
We wanted to show them that, we had on our own hustle, an ongoing operation. We were buying this stuff and we were selling, or, whatever it happened to be, the guns and the drugs, stolen cars, whatever. So we would do what we called street theater operations, where we would hire usually we would hire one of the local gangs we were dealing with uh, as security for the deal. And then we would call in other undercover agents from different cities who wouldn't be known there to come in, and we would do a fake deal between ourselves. So I would, for instance, I in this one instance where we did a storefront operation that was a military surplus store with a three lane shooting range attached to it.
Yep.
It's one of my favorite ones. So we had these gangsters coming in, they could blast their guns, convicted felons with their guns shooting in our shooting range. So this a local street gang we were dealing with, I told these guys, we had been buying a bunch of guns off these guys. And I said, listen, I have to deal with this crew out of Miami. I don't know them. And they're going to come in here and we're selling them a bunch of machine guns. I need security. Can I hire you for the day? And they were like, that's what we do. Right. And I would never tell any of them to bring a gun. I would just I'd say, listen, I'll give you a couple $100, whatever it was. But I would always have to give them very specific instructions. Don't do anything unless I say to do something, right? You don't have to do anything, just stand there. Because I didn't want any of these guys getting overzealous and pulling guns and
I can see
you know what I mean?
that ending badly for everyone.
Yeah, because this is all fake.
Yeah.
So these guys would show up. We would never set the deal too early because it was always hard to get them to show up on time. But they would show up and we would have all this scripted and worked out before with the undercovers. So in this particular deal, we had this incredible guy named Richie Zayas, a Cuban guy out of South Florida, showed up with this big bear, this huge guy who looked like a pirate on steroids with hair and all that. That was his like bodyguard. And we were selling them 10 machine guns. And they show up and we would I would like be on the phone and the guys, I would set these guys up around the business. I'd have two guys at the door, one guy in next to me at the counter, maybe one guy at the other side of the business. And I would tell them again, listen, don't do shit unless I say to do shit, please. All easy money.
Yeah.
So the fake bad guys would show up in like a panel van and get out, and they always be looking badass, incredible. And I just specifically remember this one so much because Richie was wearing these fake Nike shoes that had Tony Montana on them, the from the movie whatever that movie is, Scarface. And he had crazy hair and just a good look. And so they walk in to the business and we kind of interact in a non-friendly way. And I break out one of the machine guns and he calls the big guy over and he says, hey man, I told him, I said, listen, we got a place you can shoot it right there. So he tells, his partner there, hey man, take that gun in there and make sure it's a machine gun. So I send one of the gang members to go in there too.
Yeah.
And the ATF agent undercover goes in there and blasts the machine gun off, and the gang members like, holy shit, right?
You blokes
And
are for real.
so yes, oh yeah. So we come back, and the big guy goes out and gets a suitcase full of money, brings it in. We do the deal. They take the machine guns and leave. And I always, when they would give me the suitcase of money, I would always turn to one of my partners and say, "Hey man, go take this to the spot." And he would leave with the money
Yeah.
because I never wanted that crew to know I had a suitcase of money there, because they would rob me.
Yeah.
There's no honor among thieves. Even though I hired them, they'll still put a gun in my face and rob me.
That's where
So
you're vulnerable throughout, like all the stages of every time you're dealing with the bad guys that you're targeting, you're a potential victim as well. So you got to have that. Yeah, like when are they going to do a drug rip on you, or if you've got all these guns stored here, I know where we can get that. And
always. That's why we always let these dudes know. We would show our guns all the time and let them know that we had guns, because we knew they did. Because there is no honor among thieves, and no matter
yeah,
how friendly they were with you, we had guys coming into the storefronts that we would do a deal with them, a drug deal. They would come back that night and burglarize our place.
yeah,
I mean, we'd recognize them. We could see them on the security cameras, like we had just dealt with them, and
yeah,
they'd break in at night and steal all our shit. So and as an undercover, your fear is not, it's not, oh, they're gonna find out that I'm a cop.
yeah,
That's not the fear, because if they find out you're a Fed, any of these organizations, they're just going to put as much distance between themselves and you as they can. They don't want to
yeah,
draw any heat on themselves or the organization. That's not the fear. The fear is that next deal is going to be a rip, and they're going to kill you.
mm,
They know you're showing up to buy, a kilo, and you're showing up with $15,000. So this time, even though they've dealt with you 4 times already, on the fifth time, they're going to shoot you and take your money.
yeah.
That's the fear. There's
That would
no
be
matter
the real risk with it. When you do take them down on those sting operations, and that was your career, a large portion of your career was built on that, and you became an expert and was going across the country, advising other people. When you do take them down, there was one, and I talk about this, and this is more talking on the emotional level from being an undercover agent officer. When you do take them down, a lot of people I would imagine you've built strong relationships with the longer you're in there. And one thing I've learnt in my policing career was that just because someone's done a bad thing doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. And I'm sure you would have encountered that with the people that you're dealing with. Some are shitheads and you don't care about, but there are other people that even they could be doing the worst crime in the organised crime world, and I'm talking about killing people and all that, but you see a side to them that they care for their families and different things. You seem to be a guy that understands human nature, and I dare say because of the person you are, but the nature of the work. There was one particular one that you mentioned in the book where you had to go in and front the bloke, and a bloke that in fact invited you out, I think for his 40th birthday to celebrate, because he trusted you, of all people to trust, and couldn't trust his friends. And you were there when he got taken down and had to front him. Do you want to tell people about what happened there?
Yeah, that was a tough one. It was in Chicago,
Yeah,
and this guy he was a member of the Outlaws motorcycle gang, and he was also a member of an Italian mafia family,
yeah,
the Sarno. In Chicago, they call the outfit. That's what they call the mafia, the Italian mafia. So they had figured out this was a joint case with ATF and the FBI, that the mafia was hiring the bikers
mm,
to do some of their dirty work, and this guy had done a bombing, a big bombing. It all revolved around these video poker machines that the mafia was making all the bar owners and restaurant owners put in their businesses. And if you didn't want to play ball and put their machines in there, yeah, they'd blow your place up. So, so this guy was one of those guys who, and I'm sure you've run across these kind of guys in your career. No one could get this guy. He was really smart.
mm,
Um, he was not a convicted felon, but and he there was no crime he wasn't into. He was just really smart about it. And the FBI had sent in three informants to get him. Two of them were dirty cops, uh, childhood friends, and he sniffed them all out. He was just a sharp guy. So I went in cold on this. It was just a really strange case. I went in as a my covers. I was a kind of a down and out MMA fighter up in and I was just moved to Chicago. And it took months and months and months to get in with this guy and get his trust. When I finally did, the case kind of picked up. I was buying stolen merchandise from him. One of his, many crimes, he was fencing uh, stolen electronics, flat screen TV, surround sound systems. And I don't mean just, I mean, they were knocking off 18 wheelers, like in these deals where
big time.
the driver would get out and walk away and they would get in and take the truck, the mafia type deals. So I started buying that from him and the case went along very well. Like you mentioned, he called me out one night, had me out to a strip joint, and he sits down and he looks me in the eye and he tells me, listen, he goes, I can't trust the people I grew up with. I can't trust the people in my neighborhood that I grew up with. He said, so I really appreciate your friendship. And we did a toast and he goes, it's my 40th birthday. I didn't even know that. And again, I'm thinking to myself, because I met his wife, I met his kid, and he was a good father. He had like a 10-year-old kid, and I'm thinking, man, that's I wish you hadn't trusted me like that, kind of. And anyway, their idea, they really wanted to flip this guy, to flip on the mafia when they took him down. I knew from spending a year with this guy, there was no way he was going to flip. I just knew. I had gotten to know him, but they didn't want to hear that. So they had me lure him to the Hilton hotel at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. He thought he was going to meet Hoist Gracie, this famous MMA fighter.
Yeah.
And he shows up, and I walk him. We go up the elevator, and we walk him into his room. And instead of Hoist Gracie, they've lined up the whole room with boxes of evidence. Okay, like they're making a big show to get him to flip. There's the ATF and the FBI agents, and so I walk him in. They get him and sit him down, and he refuses to believe that I'm a cop. He's not talking. He's not giving him anything. So they're like, "Hey, you need to go in there and show him your badge and get him to talk." And that's the last thing I wanted to do. In my mind, I'm thinking, listen, I did my job, and it sucked, but I did it. And now, I don't make me do this, right? But that's the job, right? So I walk in there and I show him my badge and I tell him, listen, this is my assignment. It's my, this is my job, what I do, and I want you to know that this wasn't personal. And he looked at me and he goes, it wasn't personal. Everything you've told me up to right now has been a lie. You've met my family, my wife, my kid, my friends, and you haven't told me anything that's true this entire time. You're going to tell me that that's not personal? And for once in my life, I had no witty response. I had no retort. I just kind of looked at him, shrugged my shoulders, and walked away. I never saw him again until he was sitting in the defendant's chair at the trial. I had a hard time looking him in the eyes.
I feel it. It would be hard, and as you say, you're doing your job. But I think he sort of nailed it when he said it's not personal. Of course, it's personal to him anyway. So yeah, that's a hard hit. Another aspect that comes out, which I've always found fascinating in police work, is dealing with informants. And I just want to mention one of your informants, Ray, at one of the sting operations. He's referred to in the book as Ray. And I just thought a a lot of the work I did in my policing career, I had informants, became close to them, and respect them for what they were doing. But I've had informants like Ray that feel that they're part of the team, and they in fact become part of the team and get excited about being involved in the operation. I just had put a smile on my face how he wanted to be involved in all the takedowns, and was telling the tactical blokes what they should be doing.
Yeah, he was definitely, his father was a bigwig with the Indian police, IPS.
Yep.
And Ray had taken the test 3 times, to follow in his father's footsteps, but he failed all 3 times. So he came to America and bought a convenience store, a gas station,
Yep.
and became very successful at that. And one day he unknowingly walked into an ATF storefront operation and bought untaxed cigarettes and ended up getting arrested. So he was here illegally. He had overstayed on his visa. And even though the untaxed cigarettes really isn't much of a charge, he was
Yeah.
going to be deported. And somehow his lawyer talked me into keeping him here and making him an informant. He's the most unlikely informant. I mean, not a physically imposing guy. He's just a little Indian dude who didn't really speak English very well, and had never held a gun, never done any drugs. And this guy became, I would say, and I'm comfortable saying this, the greatest informant the United States government has ever had. Uh, just a total natural.
Yeah.
Bringing in, he got me into Mexican cartels, American street gangs, stolen car rings, just the Italian mafia. He was unbelievable because he was so unassuming,
Yeah.
and he loved doing it. We didn't pay him. He only did it just to stay here, was his reason. We never paid him, but he always wanted to go the extra mile. He wanted to be part of the takedown team. He wanted to tackle these guys himself, to the point where he could be very annoying to those, to the cops who didn't know him.
Yeah.
And it was almost in a comical way, but he took pride in his job, his role, and in the results that we had. And I'll tell you, man, it, I developed a relationship with this
Yeah.
guy. He was always kind of getting in a little bit of trouble, but it was always bullshit tax stuff.
Yeah.
But when it for the real work, for the Lord's work, getting crime guns off the street and getting large amounts of dangerous drugs, fentanyl off the street, man, he was unstoppable and
Yeah.
just a pleasure to work with. And my second book that I'll be coming out with soon is called Raycon: The Betrayal of an Informant, because
Right.
he was treated like shit by the
Yeah.
United States government. Yeah.
Yeah. I see your anger, and I'd be interested in seeing that book, because some of them, like the informants, really do a good job, and they put themselves out there, and they're putting their lives at risk depending on the circumstances and all that. But yeah, I can understand it. I've also heard you say in different interviews that you've done that some of the people that you've worked against, as in the crooks, and some of the informants, really they had your back, and that's a thing. You know that they've got your back. And when I got into trouble at the end of my police career, I had people coming out that I'd locked up supporting me, and I had informants coming out that were rock solid. I had one bloke. He's sadly, I'm not smiling when I'm saying this, because I miss him. He was part of my life. He passed away. But when I got into in trouble and it hit the media in the police, he said, "Hey brother, don't worry about it. If you get locked up, I'll get locked up, and I'll look after you in the yard." Like, he
Holy cow.
he like, and just you can't beat that type of loyalty. And I smile about some of the aspects. You've always got to keep your integrity with them and the dealings with them, but it doesn't hurt to show a little bit of humanity towards them. And quite often, that's what's motivating them. It's not always about the money or getting off charges. Sometimes they're trying to do the right thing, or they've said that they would help you, and they stick to their word. So it's an interesting aspect of policing. So I'd be very interested in your second book if you're covering off on some of that, because some of the situations you find yourself in. Now,
Yeah, Gary,
yeah,
it's just another thing that my first partner taught me. The whole treating everyone with dignity and respect. And he taught me from the beginning. He said, listen, when it comes to informants, he said, obviously every case is different, but everyone's going to tell you never fully trust an informant. You can
yep,
never fully trust an informant. He goes, really? He said, this guy's taking me into this house
mm,
with a bunch of people who will definitely kill me if they can. He goes, so my whole life depends on this guy. He's vouching for me.
yeah,
I'm not supposed to trust that guy. And he taught, and you treat them with respect and dignity, again, just like a crook,
yeah.
unless they give you a reason not to,
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you totally on that. So your career, and you're not the first police officer or law enforcement officer, or the last that's appeared on this show, that their career didn't end the way that they thought it would end.
Yeah.
How did your career end?
My career ended with very bad choices.
Yep.
And those were made by me. Um, I had lost my way. We started this conversation by talking about when you work undercover, sometimes you become that
Yeah.
person that you're portraying. And I had done that. I was believing my own bullshit, right? I was buying into the shit that I was selling. I bought it myself.
Mm.
And I was running around to the detriment of my family and my friends. I was running around in this world, this crime world, and living my life, starting to believe, that I was Sal Nunziato, and it led to excessive drinking, um, and it led to infidelity with my wife. And unfortunately, it was with a federal prosecutor who was working, assigned to the
Mm.
cases, these operations that I was doing. And when that came out, there was the end of both of our careers, and a really hard fall for me, because of those circumstances. The government really turned
Mm.
on us and went after us. And these inappropriate relationships have been happening since the dawn of time,
Yeah.
between male and female cops and prosecutors and all that. But because of the nature of this, they went after us, went overboard. However, it sent me just spinning down into this world where I couldn't get out of. I didn't think there was a way out. I was like, wow, these people are going after me. And these are the same people, that I've been working with my whole career. I know they can get anyone they set their sights on.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they be able to get me? And I mean, I went, Gary, when I tell you I probably lost 50 pounds in a matter of a few weeks, a total mental breakdown. Everything just that I had been holding inside, just it all came out. And I ended up, and I don't say this for dramatic effect, but I ended up uh, sitting in my bedroom, paranoid, thinking every car driving by was, a government surveillance. And I ended up just trying to find a reason not to end it because I didn't see any way out. And luckily, my faith and just the just slight glimmer, chance that my family would, forgive me, and that carried me through,
Mm.
and I was able to make it through. And once I was cleared, I made the decision to retire. I had been on for 26 years at that point,
Yeah.
and so at that point, I had a buddy who was a homicide detective, and he told me, he said, "Man, you got to write a book." He said, "As a mental exercise." He goes, "You got to write a book." He goes, because I've never seen anyone go through the crazy shit you've gone through. And so it was a mental exercise. And I wrote the book, and the book just did really well. And next thing you know, my second career is in the entertainment industry,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I know the path you've walked, and when you said like the paranoia, when you feel like the people that were after you, the people that you used to work with, it's confronting, isn't it? And I don't see you as a person crying poor or whatever, and I'm not either. Yeah, that's the game. That's the world that we've been involved in. We're set up to understand how it plays out. But
Yep.
you've gone from being in your mind the good guy, doing everything, and that was your passion, and then that was taken away from you. So I can understand how hard a path it was to dig your way out of it. And I think in your book you gave kudos to your wife that had a hard conversation with you when you're at your lowest point, and the fact that you managed to fix things up there. But yeah, public humiliation is never good, and when an organisation you've given your heart and soul to turns on you, I can understand the pain.
And brother, it was I don't know how long your situation lasts, but mine was 2.5 years. I can tell you they don't put that much effort into a murder investigation as they put into trying to take down one of their own.
Yeah,
Um, and so it was, and you know, as guys like us who are always used to being in control, type A personalities, to have no control and the unknown is the worst thing in the world. And that's
yeah.
what, for the first time in my life, I had no control over what was going to happen to me. And man, it drove me crazy.
I
Um,
understand exactly where you're coming from with it, and yeah, I share that pain, and that is part of it. And I think being a cop, law enforcement officer, you're in control of things, and then all of a sudden it's taken away. So that's another part of it, and you lose your tribe. I lost that many what I considered friends. Now I look back and think maybe it wasn't true friends, but the ones that were true friends have really stood up, and had to delete 90% of my numbers in my phone because I never heard from anyone. And I'm sure you went through
boy,
that type of stuff.
isn't it funny? I had three phones, right? I had my government phone, my official one, my undercover phone, and my personal phone.
Yeah,
And between the three of them, there wasn't a minute when they weren't ringing off the hook. It was either informants or bad guys or my colleagues or my supervisors or friends or whatever it was. And overnight, they all went silent, and
yeah.
it was deafening. Silence was deafening.
It's again, stop it. You're making me relive it too, because yeah,
Yeah.
your life was dictated by your phone, and all of a sudden your phone's not ringing. Writing the book, did you find that cathartic? Like really understanding? Okay, I was doing some good work, and these are the things I've done. Did that help you?
Man, it was because what I did was one of my supervisors at the end, he pulled me aside, and you know they all had my back, man. They were
Yeah.
great. He pulled me aside and he said, "Here's what I want you to do." He goes, "That copy over there." He goes, "I want you to print out every report you've ever written." And
Mm,
so I just started printing them out, and that's what I used. You know, I read through them to help me write the book, and it was cathartic. And in my case in particular, the two false allegations against me,
yeah.
what they accused me of, they were killers because the worst thing you can do to a cop is to accuse him of being untruthful, right?
Yeah.
Because it kills your credibility. So the two accusations against me were one was perjury on the stand, and the other was false information in an application for the S visa for my informant.
Yeah.
So when you accuse, all we have as police officers are our word on the stand, and
100%.
when you get accused of being a liar,
Mm,
it's a career ender. It's a career killer. Not only for your law enforcement career, but for any job you might want afterward.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When someone Googles you and they see an accusation of perjury, you're
Yeah.
done. And all that made the paper and the internet and the news. But when I was cleared, it's funny that didn't make the paper. No one wrote an article about me getting cleared.
Yeah.
So So I've had to work extra hard. A guy approached me who owns a magazine here, and he wanted me to be in the magazine. And I was like, dude, I've had my little encounter with the press, and it hasn't been good, so I'm gonna have to politely decline it. And he
Yeah,
said, listen, he goes, what do you want the most? He goes, what do you want in life right now at this point the most? And I said, what I want the most is I don't want my son to ever Google my name and
yeah,
see this bullshit that's been written about me. He said, well, then you have to bury that with good stuff.
yeah.
Bury it so that's on the 10th page. So I said, okay. And I did it. He put me on the cover of his magazine, and that kind of kick-started this whole second career.
Yeah. Oh, well, full credit to you because it is a hard road back, and all the things that you touch on, I know how it hits. And but look, I'm glad you found something, and it sounds like you got some exciting things afoot in the future. You talking of a TV show, you got something coming up along those lines as well.
So the first season just finished. We filmed it in 2024, and it ran its course on Discovery and on HBO Max or
Yeah,
Max. It's called Operation Undercover, and I'm the host of the show. And
yeah,
what I do is I go around this country, around America, to different cities, different police departments and sheriff departments, and we embed with these departments for a week with their undercover units.
yeah.
And
Wow.
they let us right in. And I mean, when I say in bed, like we are in the cars with them. When there's an undercover officer walking into a hotel room to buy, uh, a kilo of fentanyl from some cartel guy, we're right on the outside on the perimeter watching. And, we show it all. And it all gets shown. And we did 7 episodes uh, in different states all over the country,
Yeah,
different police departments, and we show the case. These are faster cases
mm,
because we're only there for a week, but we show it from beginning to end, from when they're talking to the informant and he's bringing the undercover officer in, and the drug buys or the gun buys, whatever it happens to be, and then afterward when they kick the door in and take down the bad guy, we show the whole thing.
wow.
So it's never been done before. There's no recreations. This is real.
No, I'm thinking that sounds like a cracker of a show. What's the name of it?
It's called Operation Undercover. And like I said, it wrapped up in December, but you can stream it on Discovery Plus or Max.
Okay.
Just type in Operation Undercover, it'll pop right up. There's 7 episodes to watch, and it's fast paced. I mean, it's no, again, I don't like recreations. There's no, it's all real. And I'll tell you what, man, it is exciting as hell.
Yeah, no, it sounds it because like the undercover work is a world that even cops don't get to see. Like cops get to see things other people don't see, but then it's at another level when you look at the undercover stuff. So that sounds good. Second book in the planning as well.
Yeah.
After
So the first book did really good. It was called Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover.
mm,
And I basically just tell my story like I've told it to you. And it was bought by a Hollywood company. Right now, these things take forever, but
yeah,
right now it's in front of Netflix, and they're looking at it at possibly making it into a Netflix series with each storefront being a different season.
yeah.
uh, using different actors for my different undercover teams and all. So we'll see if that happens. And right now I'm waiting to hear from Discovery about season 2 for
Yeah.
Operation Undercover.
Exciting times, and in my transition from policing into working in the media, it's good working with creative people too, isn't it? Sometimes
Yeah.
policing can be a little bit negative, and then you step away and credit where credit's due. If you're doing a good job, it's you're not competing. It's creative people, and they've got an energy that sort of revitalizes. So that's I'm glad you found that path.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you got a second career as well and you're in it. I don't know if you experienced the same thing I did. What I found uh, with the entertainment industry, the downside is at least when I was a cop, every 2 weeks my paycheck came in.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
regardless, I knew it. It is so hard getting people to write you a check in the entertainment industry.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you're feeding your family from it, you really got to hustle, man.
And I can see your experience when you're saying, "Oh, they're doing this," but until it's done, it's done. Do you miss aspects of police in the adrenaline rush and aspects of the life that you lived?
So that's crazy. The answer was definitely a yes, but fortunately, last year I got to experience it again because I found myself right back in the mix with these cops doing undercover cases. I didn't have a gun. I could,
Yeah.
right? You
Actually,
know, I'm
Lou,
in the car.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm a bit pissed off with you. Why can't we do an embedding the homicide detective with homicide? It sounds sounds good. But yeah, you found a way to keep it running. So full credit to you. I just want to finish off with because we're struggling to find police here in Australia, in different states and all that, the undermanned, and there seems to be a real reluctance for people to join the police. What would you say to anyone that's considering a career in law enforcement?
Well, you know, we've had the same thing here in America, right? It's been a tough 5 years for law
Mm,
enforcement in America. We've had riots, we've had craziness. Recruiting is down to zero. You know, over here, cops are not paid well.
yep,
You know, if you want to be rich in this country, you don't go into law enforcement, and I'm sure it's that way
yeah,
in most countries. But here's what I would tell, and I do tell when young people ask me about going into law enforcement, I tell them this. I say, listen, if you want a career where you will really experience a true brotherhood, and when I say a brotherhood, I mean it doesn't matter. I'm not talking male, female, just a real brotherhood and a connection. I said, there's nothing other than possibly the military where you're going to experience that, being part of a team and doing something that's fulfilling,
yeah,
and you know, and actually making a difference and helping to protect the community. And you're going to also, depending on where you want to go, there's so many avenues once you get into law enforcement. You know, if your thing is you want to be a dog handler, you want to work explosives, drugs, guns, white collar crime, counterfeiting. I mean, it's unlimited. You
yeah,
can go, it's not like a regular job where you're pigeonholed. You can go into anything and it can be fulfilling. My only word of caution or warning is that don't go into it if you think if you're doing it for accolades or appreciation, because you're not, that
yeah,
doesn't happen. But and the other thing is if if it is your choice and you do it, and I wouldn't tell anyone not to do it, build that resume while you're doing it and think of the future. Think of, you know, the life after, because you know
it-
there's a lot of good things you can go into if you're smart about it.
yeah.
Opportunities, you know, after law enforcement, which I did not do, but a lot, you know, as you
Yeah,
know, a lot of men.
but it's good. It's good advice because it can. Yeah, you're playing at the sharp end of a world, and it can end pretty quickly in dramatic circumstances. And you should look for what you've got outside of law enforcement. I've really enjoyed this chat. It gets me itchy feet and wants me to be a cop again, hearing the stories. And I love the book, and I get the shits when I read too many cop books because it makes me want to get back into doing what I do. Or what I did, I should say. So I haven't even let it go. But I want to thank you for the service to the community. And, you know, I don't think we've mentioned this, but part of your career, and I know when it ends not in the way you expect it, sometimes you think, well, what good have I done? I think in the operations you were involved in, Lou, there was over 1,000 guns taken off the street, and not to mention all the drugs and everything else. That you've made a difference, mate. It's a big difference.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you for those words, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you take care. Good luck with the future.
God bless you.